Back in November 2015, Elise set off to run a 5,000-mile lap of Britain, carrying her kit on her back. What followed was a coastal adventure involving lots of cake, a terrible fear of cows, and occasionally a little bit of running. Please welcome Elise.
It was almost exactly 2 years ago today that I decided it would be a great idea to run a lap of the British coast. It was a journey of about 5,000 miles. I'd be carrying my kit on my back, and I anticipated it would take about 10 months. And I imagined it would look like this. I imagined it would be all sunshine and ice cream, and that it'd be amazing. I'd spent a fair amount of time outdoors before, mostly being dragged up mountains by my dad. We had a great time. Shortly after this photo, taken at the top of Cardiff Idris when I was 7, I fell off the mountain and wet myself. Clearly, this was enough to spark a passion for the great outdoors. I'd never been on a big adventure though, and I'd certainly never planned one before. Somebody told me that it'd probably be a good idea to plot my route though. I didn't really know what this meant, so I went onto paint and I drew this outline of the British coast, mostly just so I had something to put on Facebook. It wasn't until 2 weeks before I finished that I actually learned how to read a map. But somehow I made it to the start line. I set off from Greenwich on November the 1st, 2015, right in time for winter, and I ran 17 miles to Dartford. And of all the wonderful exotic places in the world where you could begin an adventure, I can confirm that Dartford just is not one of them. And it's probably not really okay to be throwing tantrums in public aged 24, but that's exactly what I did on the second morning of the run. My legs ached, my backpack, which I'd put on for the first time the day before, had rubbed, and I wasn't actually convinced that I really liked running all that much. Because not only was I totally unprepared for this journey, I was also completely unqualified to be doing it. I really was heading into the unknown. And I think the whole thing really gives people the wrong idea about my athletic abilities. I'd been running for less than 2 years at this point, and I'd ran one marathon. And during this marathon, I was dressed as a Crayola crayon, as it was a stupid charity endeavour, and I cried for a solid 8 miles to be heckled by a child as the crying crayon. But despite being pretty rubbish at running, there was something about it that just really appealed to me, this idea that something was impossible, like running a mile, and then it was totally possible. And I was following other people doing these huge adventures on the internet, and I thought, well, why can't I do that? Nobody else shared this belief in me at all. My mum's favourite story to tell is about how about a week after I announced I was going to do this trip, I got so lost a mile from home that she had to come and pick me up in the car. But I wanted to be somebody that had run around a country, and the only way to do that was to run around a country. And that's why I dragged myself from Dartford to Gravesend. After a few days, I finally reached the sea, and the journey clockwise around the coast began. I still didn't know what I was doing, and I didn't know what to expect, but somehow I just had this feeling that I had to try, and I couldn't give up in Dartford train station car park. People always ask, weren't you scared? And the answer is yes. I was totally terrified. I'm terrified of everything. Tomato ketchup, ever being this tanned again, opening my emails. But you have to differentiate between real versus perceived fear. My main fear was being followed and meeting a gruesome end on a remote trail. But I stayed with a paramedic, and he told me that it's really rare to be assaulted by a stranger, and statistically, my biggest threat was my own dad. As you can see, he isn't really that scary, and really, by avoiding all the people I know for 10 months, I was pretty safe. There are some things that you should be scared of, though. For instance, cows have killed 74 people in the past 15 years. And fear comes from a lack of understanding. So I took to Google to try and work out what exactly I should do if I came across any deadly farmyard animals. And they said that if a ram was to approach me, I should stare it in the face, let it approach, grab it by the horns, spin it round, and that probably won't put it off. And I'm probably going to have to do that 50 times before it gets fed up. And I became so terrified, not of the rams anymore, but of the prospect of having to spin one 50 times. And all that fear, even if slightly unfounded, became quite exhausting. I was running up to 40 miles a day, I missed my family, and my visions of sunshine and ice cream weren't quite accurate. I spent so much time in this raincoat that I can't even tell you. And so I started to play a few games with myself, and a big one that I played was the Be Glad game. And the idea is simple. You just have to think of 5 things that you're glad about in any given moment. Because there's always something, even if it's just that my feet weren't this wet for once, or that somebody nice had brought me a cake. And I did this because I wanted to love it, I wanted to enjoy it. I knew that I was in a really fortunate position to have been able to save up enough money and abandon my entire life for 10 months. And I didn't want it to be miserable. And I think it was that sheer determination to love it that meant that inevitably I did. There were so many beautiful places, and sometimes it was all ice cream and sunshine. And more than that, there were the amazing people I met, which I think is a recurring theme of this whole night. When I set off, I thought I'd be camping the whole time. I had my tent on my back. But what actually happened was that I experienced this crazy rollerball effect of social media, and I stayed with over 200 strangers from the internet in a way that was less creepy than it sounds. Over the course of the 300 nights I was away, including George, who spoke earlier tonight. And I got this incredible 24-hour snapshot into people's lives. I was reading their kids' bedtime stories. I was taking selfies with their pets. I went swimming. I went to a choir practice, which was pretty alarming because I can't actually clap in time. And I met all these amazing, interesting people. And eventually, after 301 days and 5,000 miles and a lot of chafing, I made it to the finish line. And along the way, I somehow did that in 10 months, which was the figure I just plucked out of thin air before I started. And I realised that there were 2 kind of never-ending sources of happiness. And the first is that you just have to try. You have to really try to be happy and find the good in all the wet days and the soggy feet. And the second is cake, because no matter how rubbish it is, there's always another slice of cake to eat.